I think a lot of what they announced, we sort of knew was coming. A lot of it was in the manifesto. A lot we've already known. So there's this whole thing of everybody's sort of like looking away from it.
It's visible on.
Just distracted.
I'll wait for him to go.
Well, you're on camera, so
Yeah. Well, that's the beginning of the podcast sorted. Hello and welcome back to Bite the Ballot, TLDR's election podcast, although admittedly a little after the election now. Today I'm joined by Ben Blissett.
Hello.
And Rory Taylor.
Hello.
And we're in a weird space.
Very weird.
We're in our new offices and we're sat at our meeting table, which isn't where we'll be recording videos going forward. But the studio isn't yet ready for anything besides normal one-person videos like the main channels. So for the moment, we'll record podcasts in here until everything is ready through there, and then we'll move. So apologies if things look a bit bad at the moment. It's only temporary. So in today's episode, we're going to run through our predictions for the election, which obviously we made a while ago. We're not going to spend too long on that because the results is kind of old news now. So we don't want to spend too long going through the results and our predictions. But we said we'd score them, we said we'd score you, and we probably ought to do both things. So we'll start with that. Then we'll run through some information from the King's speech, which happened yesterday, and what Labour is up to and their plans for government now that, spoiler alert, they won. We probably should have.
Yeah.
We should have announced that. There's no one watching. This is their only source of news, right?
They've been waiting to find out.
So let's start with the scoring. Remember, we asked you to join in too on Twitter, and in return we said that we'd give away a copy of our magazine, which comes out in about 2 or 3 weeks' time, to the person who was most correct. Now, a lot of you did that, so it's pretty impossible for us to filter through and determine who was the most accurate. But if your prediction on Twitter that was time-stamped to before the election has a perfect score, so if you got everything right, if you got points for every single thing, then tag me at in your tweet and I will determine which one of those 100% people actually got the closest best guess, and they will be sent a free copy of the magazine, which, by the way, we'll show you in a moment, and if you want to order a copy of, we'll explain how you do that in a minute. But for now, let's go through the results and mark yourself and tag me if you got 100%.
Can I just check? You said at.
Oh,
you're
no,
not that.
At TLDR Jack. Apologies. I mean, I am also that, but don't tag that one. At TLDR Jack. Cool. Good note. Thank you, Rory.
That's right.
Okay, so the first thing we got you to predict was the size of number of seats Labour would receive. The actual number of seats was 412. Ben, what was your guess?
Mine was 450, so it was a little bit out.
That is a little bit out. Rory, what was your guess?
431, so closer, but still not that close.
Zach guessed 440, Georgina guessed 450. You had to be within 10 in order to get it, so that is no points for everyone. And if you're playing along at home, you needed to guess somewhere between 402 and 422 in order to score that point. Next up, the Conservatives. You had to be within 5 on this one. They got 121 seats. Ben, what did you predict?
I predicted just under 100, I predicted 98.
Rory?
I was just over 100 with 101.
Georgina guessed 51, Zach guessed 80, so again, no points for anyone. And again, if you're playing along at home, you have to be between 116 and 126 in order to score.
We're not doing well
point.
so far,
No.
are we?
So far, you're on 0, and no one has actually even come that close to getting a single point. But moving forward, Lib Dems. The Lib Dems got 72 seats. You had to be within 3 in order to score this point. Ben?
Yeah, I predicted 55.
That isn't within 3, quite.
No.
I was so close. I predicted 67, but
Which is
still
pretty
not,
good.
Not scoring a point.
Georgina guessed 65, which also isn't within the realm of scoring, and Zach guessed 70, which is.
Oh.
So that's our first point on the board for Zach, who can probably hear us talking. He's upstairs at the moment. So congrats. He can't. He's got his headphones on. He's absolutely jamming along to something and typing. So that's 1 point. And if you're playing along at home, you needed between 69 and 75 to score that point. Next up, the Reform Party. You had to be within 1 seat on this one. The Reform Party got 5 seats. How many did you each guess?
I guessed 2.
Okay.
Same, 2.
Georgina guessed 1, Zach guessed 10. Again, that's no points. For you guys, you needed between 4 and 6 in order to score that point. So thus far, we got 1 point on the board between everyone.
1 point is a winning score.
1 point could be a
something.
winning score. Hopefully someone did get every point at home. The Green Party. There was no margin for error on this. You needed the exact number. They got 4 seats. Ben?
2.
Rory?
3.
Georgina joined you on 3. Zach joined you on 2. Again, no points.
We don't know anything.
The SNP. You had a margin of error for 2 on this one. They got 9 seats. Ben?
I guessed 20, which I think was actually on the lower end of our
It is on the
guesses.
lower end. Georgina went lower than you with 17. Rory went,
25.
and Zach went even higher on
I
35.
got scolded for saying 20 as well, I'd like to point out, and even that wasn't low enough.
Yeah.
No one got anywhere near.
No.
Next up. Oh no, so that is all the parties actually. So at the end of the parties section, 1 point. Okay, here's some point scoring. Will Sunak keep his seat? You each said yes. Everyone said yes. And
Yeah.
he did keep his seat.
Yeah.
So that is a
Yes,
point each.
on the board.
Unsurprisingly, if you're playing at home, this is a binary thing. You either got it right or you didn't. So a point if you get each of these right. Jeremy Hunt, will he keep his seat? Ben said.
I said no.
Rory said.
No.
Georgina and Zach both said yes. So that is a point for both of
Oh,
them.
Ben, me and you are falling behind now.
Will Jeremy Corbyn keep his seat? Ben?
I said no.
Rory?
I also said no.
Zach and Georgina both said no too. He did keep his seat, so that is no points. Will George Galloway keep his seat? Ben?
I said no.
Rory?
I also said no.
Everyone said no.
Yes.
He did lose his seat, so that is a
Points
point
all round.
on everyone's tally. Final one. I don't actually know what the plus or minus was on this. I didn't write it down. So I'm guessing
I think it was not
It wasn't
a big
big.
one.
I'll allow 1. If
think-
we didn't say at the time, I'm allowing
Yeah.
plus or minus 1. Turnout, Rory, you guessed.
66%.
Ben, what did you guess?
I guess 63%.
Zach guessed 62, Georgina guessed 65. What was the actual?
I've
61
got it
point
as
something?
59.9 according to
Ooh.
Wikipedia, but that might be.
I would like, as well,
Yeah, you
in this
should.
section, to point out that there was someone on Twitter, and I won't name them, but they quote tweeted me and said, it shows that he doesn't know what he's talking about on politics, that he's put the turnout figure at 63%, then replied to himself and said this would make it like the lowest 63%, my guess, would make it the lowest turnout since like the Blair era, and that's inconceivable and shows that I don't know what I'm talking about. And then obviously it's even lower than what I predicted.
And then what did he do, Ben?
He actually deleted his tweet and then said something like, "Oh well, you got your Corbyn prediction wrong, so there."
Yeah, we've
so,
got lots of other predictions.
So
wrong
there.
as well.
so there.
Okay, so plus or minus 1 on this one. If we're saying it's basically 60%, because everyone gave a round number,
Yeah.
60% is the middle. We'll accept 59 and 61, which means Zach was very close to getting it, but no one did. Overall scores for us then. In joint third place, we
Joint
have
last.
Ben and Rory.
Yeah,
on, Ben.
Then
it's good that we've got the least informed people on this.
I mean, this is a
podcast.
great way to build confidence in the episode before we've even began.
Yeah.
Bronze medal.
Then in second place, Georgina. Congrats. Yeah. And then in first place is Zach Michaelis. Wait, someone could stand up on the balcony. Do you have anything to say? You won't be able to hear you, but
I'm so glad I'm not this podcast. I'm just so despondent. Just listening to that. We were wrong. No, we were wrong about that.
What was the points difference between me and Zach?
Zach got 4 points, Georgina got 3, Rory and Ben got 2.
I should have gone for Corbyn as keeping us.
Yeah, that would have swung it. Okay, so as we were saying, let us know, tag me, TLDR Jack, if you got 100%, you got every single question right. I'd also say, what was the maximum total score? The maximum total score was 11. I'd say if you got 9 or above, tag me, because I think the odds that someone got 11, pretty minimal. So if you got 9 or more points, tag me and we'll review and see if you got close enough in order to get a copy of the magazine. Which, by the way, we have a draft copy of. Oh, upside down. This isn't the finished copy, but it's a lovely magazine, as I think we've discussed previously. The quality of it is superb. It's got a beautiful little spine. It's got a nice cover. and it's like an actual magazine. It's very exciting.
It is an actual magazine.
It is an actual magazine. And if you didn't win yourself a copy, but you'd still like one, you can get £2 off a copy by using the code Bite the Ballot at TLDR. No, using the code Bite the Ballot at toolong.news, or you can just click the link in the description. Any copy you buy, you'll get £2 off by using the code Bite the Ballot. That code won't last much longer, so if you're tempted, if you'd like to support the channel, if you'd like our best journalism, then pick up a copy of the magazine and we will send it out to you as soon as we can. Okay, so those were the results, and obviously Ben and Rory, not perfect scores. I'm not going to critique too hard because we didn't review my guesses, and I doubt I did much better than you did.
Did you do guesses?
I tweeted it.
Why haven't we gone through yours?
Because I wasn't part of the original video. But if you want, while you're talking,
yes.
I will find my tweet and mark it.
Okay.
But these guesses weren't super close.
No.
Why do you think that is? Are you just bad at your jobs?
No. I'll defend us both here, Rory. And
Well,
say
I don't.
that's
I'm not head of TLDR UK.
Well, I'll
so
defend myself on my own then. No, the MRP polls were largely under-predicted what the Tories would get, over-predicted what Labour would get. I think also we saw they were pretty wrong just on Reform UK as well. But then again, it varied a lot more with Reform. So there were some that were saying 1 or 2. There were some that went up to like 17. So the range within, what we were expecting from Reform. And in fact, the exit poll itself we saw was massively wrong. It was way off. It was predicting 13 seats and they got 5. Less than half what the exit poll was predicting, which is just pretty shockingly bad. I know that there's some arguments about, exit polls being worse at predicting smaller parties, but even factoring that in, it was still pretty bad. It's just the variability of the MRP polls is already quite wide for Labour and the Tories. They both fell. Labour fell on the much, much, much lower end of those. The Tories, on the much, much higher, considering that the MRP polls before were predicting between sort of 50, 60 Tory seats up to about 120. The fact they got 121 in the end, and the exit poll itself was predicting 130. That is just a lot better. I think it comes down to what I was saying actually on the live stream beforehand and just in a couple of the podcasts before, which is that what people answer for in opinion polls and in MRP polls is just a different question to what they're asked on polling day. When you're asked who do you want to vote for, it's easy to say Reform UK, but when you actually get to the ballot box and you sort of think about the implications of that, and you think that they're not going to get many seats, and you think which party is going to best represent me if you are right wing, ultimately the answer you'll probably fall on is the Tories, irrespective of the fact that you might have told a pollster beforehand that you were going to vote Reform. That sort of like mentality changes when you're in the voting booth. I think that is ultimately what happened, and that's why we've seen the Tories win more seats than obviously we predicted. And obviously the implication of that is that Labour didn't win as many. Also, it's worth noting that there are a number of Tory seats where they won, and it was ridiculously tight. Yeah. I think a part of this, I know that this doesn't sort of explain all of the variability in MRP polls and what we actually got, but some of it is luck. When you come down to 100 votes, that is ridiculously small, and there were some that were even fewer than that. Was it Richard Holden's seat that was something like 20? It was something like 20. 20 votes. I mean, you just can't. There was no accounting for that. That's not a vote of confidence in him. No one can predict that. That is just luck when it's 20 votes. Yeah. That's the difference between somebody deciding to go out because the weather's not nice and someone else deciding to because they want to stretch their legs. Like that is what we're talking about there. So there are a few seats. I mean, my home constituency, Beverley and Holderness, that's had a Tory MP for a very long time, and they won with a majority of 125. Yeah. Again, there's no accounting for that. Yeah. So it's a combination of different things, but some seats were just very, very tight.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing to me that we got wrong was turnout, probably.
Yeah.
Because the other ones we were sort of basing on polling and stuff like that, but turnout was something that was, I think we predicted based entirely on just precedent. Feeling really, and and precedent, I suppose. And it was I think we all thought it would go down from 2019, but not by that much. Yeah. And I don't think, maybe because we are all interested and quite in tune with politics, apparently, that we sort of didn't appreciate how much the electorate had sort of switched off from this
Well,
election.
Not to I did make this argument a little bit when
Yeah,
I weighed my. I know I wasn't low enough.
Yeah.
But when I was saying about it being 63, I think and it was more than what I thought. It was more than most of us thought. I think you're absolutely right that the fact that the polls are showing such a massive Labour majority, I think people just, when people see such large majorities, they just assume, what's the point in me going and voting?
Yeah.
Like, we know what's going to happen. When the Tories are even conceding Keir Starmer will be the Prime Minister, people who aren't as in tune just
Probably
think, what's
don't
the
bother.
point?
Yeah.
There were people I know personally that I was sort of having to sort of argue, but if everyone thought that, then, trying to badger into going and voting.
Okay, well, thank you for defending yourselves. I think that's a valid response. To answer the question from a moment ago, I also got 2 points.
Which two did you get?
I also got the same two you did, Sunak and Galloway. I would say I was the closest on reform. I was 1 away from getting a point on that.
Did you guess 4?
I guess 3, but 4 would have, because you had the range. Also, my turnout was, and no one's going to believe this, I put the turnout in the tweet as 72, but in my notes I have it as 62. I just typoed it because it's obviously wasn't going to be 72, and I genuinely did think it was going to be a lower end just because of, as you said, people are.
But you still would have been
disincentivized
out
from
on the
voting.
turnout.
I still wouldn't have got it, but I was fairly close on that. And my Tory guess wasn't terrible. I was on the upper end of that, but yeah, no, I got 2 points as well. So same issue.
So we're all
all wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's take this informed panel forward to the next section of the podcast and discuss what Labour are going to do with their slightly smaller than we expected, but still significant majority.
I would just very quickly.
I love that Ben is so upset about the fact he was wrong.
No.
Oh, is this
This is different. No, this is for
us talking.
No, this was just in response to. I just want the narrative that Labour won a smaller majority. It's still a ridiculously large majority.
Yeah, of course.
So I just want to point that out.
Yeah.
It's still huge. But yeah, they've so it was. Well, where do we go from here?
Well, I thought we were moving on. There was a nice clean cut there.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah. So obviously yesterday
gonna
was
cut all
the.
this.
This is true.
Just start again.
So yesterday was the King's speech. So it was on the upper end of what we were sort of expecting from it. So in the days sort of leading up to it, there was some speculation that there might be. Some people were saying 32 bits of new legislation.
Okay.
There ended up being 40, which is quite significant. Also,
At least we're not the only ones who are bad at predicting.
no, this is true. Also, it was one of the longer King's speeches, so it was about 1,400 words, which I think is one of the longest King's speeches since 2003. So there's packed in a lot in there. And the point of the King's speech is to sort of set the legislative agenda for the next Parliament, which is usually a year long. Yeah. Now, the sort of debate about whether this was quite as radical as we were expecting, there is a lot of legislation mentioned there, but the key thing to note here is that a lot of it we were expecting. So there's a ton of different stuff in there that we were the National Wealth, the National Wealth Fund bill. Yeah. We knew that was coming. Reeves announced it in the first few days of her becoming Chancellor. That was there. There was a lot in there about them wanting to sort of increase growth, and this, bills related to that. Again, this was mentioned a lot in the campaign. I think one of the things related to that we maybe weren't expecting as much or this quickly was this new thing about the Office for Budget Responsibility. So they're trying to give them more power to review government spending, and this is almost directly a consequence of Liz Truss. Okay. The OBR usually produces an analysis of budgets, and they didn't for her mini budget last year because technically speaking it wasn't a budget. Okay. So but had they done that, there would have been some warning signs that it might crash the economy. Yeah. So that didn't happen, and clearly Labour are keen to show that we're not going to be repeating that. Yeah. We're going to try and stop that from happening.
Did you see?
And I saw that Liz
Truss's reaction was quite amusing.
It was quite good. She put out a tweet sort of.
She said that bad policies include giving more powers to a failed OBR, and we might come on to this, but she also said it reintroduces Stalinist housing targets, which is fun. But anyway,
She's also got her own like little branding. I saw.
Yeah.
She's got like a logo. And
I guess
things.
I
she's
do
not
like the
an MP
people that
anymore.
replied to her
Yeah.
saying that if she feels that strongly, she should contact her local MP.
That is good.
So yeah, that was quite good. There's also some stuff about devolution. The phrase they used was an English devolution bill, which does make it so, because there's obviously this big argument that Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland have devolved parliaments. So of the 4 nations of the United Kingdom, England is the only one without a devolved parliament. So phrasing it as the English devolution bill makes it sound like they're going to create an English parliament.
Yeah.
That's not what they're doing. They're looking to give more local leaders some more powers over local transport and communities, stuff like that. So that's what that one's doing. Some more stuff on railways and transport. There's also some stuff on some of their other things that they've mentioned in the manifesto and in their first few days. There's like the Great British Energy, stuff about borders, stuff about crime and punishment. So things to give, strengthen community policing. But to be honest, that's sort of the argument that they're being quite radical. The counter argument to that is that the much more radical stuff, so like votes for 16-year-olds, stuff on House of Lords reform, none of that was mentioned. So like you can make the argument that it's quite radical because they've mentioned 40 pieces of new legislation, but a lot of it isn't that bold, and a lot of it is the sort of like stuff we already knew they were doing. But the stuff that
some of their more radical things they'd had talked about, like you said, votes at 16 haven't made it into this. And you never know with King's, formerly Queen's, now King's speeches, if that's because they've given up on those things or they're just saying, we will do this, but it's just going to be late. It's going to be further down the line. It's not going to be this year. Because obviously they have to, there's a limit on the amount of bills they can pass in a year. So you sort of have to just wait and see if those things will come up at some point. And they haven't indicated that they're going to scrap the idea of votes at 16, but I guess they've just pushed it a year or two back. So we have to wait and see on that one.
Yeah, as you say, the whole point of this is that it's a legislative agenda for the next parliament. A parliament is a year long. So like, as you say, they might have mentioned things like House of Lords reform or votes at 16. Just because it wasn't in the King's speech doesn't mean that they're not going to do it. It just means it's not their priority for the next year. But for people that were like looking at this new Labour government coming in with a huge majority and thought they'd be making huge radical changes within that first year, this sort of puts a damper on that a little bit. You can make an argument that some of these are quite big. I think particularly the sort of like National Wealth Fund. I think that is quite a big one.
It's quite a small number.
What?
Well, the National Wealth Fund. It's £7 billion over 5 years. It's like...
Yeah, but if you have the private investment at 3 times that, it's not insignificant.
Yeah, but it depends whether or not the private investment...
Well, of course it depends on that, but obviously the argument they would make is that it will be.
It is 10% of the original pledge.
Okay.
The power dynamic of this argument does not work. It's not fair to argue someone above you.
I think the thing is, the National Wealth Fund, it is the boldest thing that they've announced here. It is £7 billion and they're expecting 3 times that in private investment. There is an argument that it's not as much as they originally sort of penciled in for it.
Yeah.
But in terms of their other announcements in the King's speech, it is definitely on the upper end of, the exciting bills, that they're announcing. But as I said, a lot of these we sort of know, and the main point is that the main juicy things that people were sort of getting excited about in the election, House of Lords reform, votes for 16, not included in
To be fair,
this.
on the House of Lords reform thing, they have said they have included the scrapping hereditary peers, but not the age limit or anything more than that. So there is something, just not.
Yeah, but I would say about the scrapping the hereditary peers is that we sort of did that in 98 and we kept 92 of them in the Weatherall Amendment.
And
I know.
The remaining 92, which is quite a big deal.
I'm aware, but it's not... When they first did that and they got rid of hundreds of them, that's exciting. Getting rid of the footnote
I think this is still
amount
something. Yeah, I mean it's nearly 100 less lords. It's quite a big cut.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's one of those things where it's not constitutionally that significant. We've already got rid of most of them. It's just the hangers on.
I disagree, but it's not interesting enough to argue. I think one of the most interesting things to watch, sort of following the King's speech, and this might slightly break the fourth wall in that we're filming it on Wednesday as the debate has started but hasn't finished.
Yes. Okay.
So Parliament, the House of Commons debates the King's speech and then they vote on it, and Labour, it'll obviously pass because Labour massive majority, but there are some Labour MPs who want to table amendments to it to sort of signal dissatisfaction with the speech and things that aren't included. So one thing that one Labour MP wants to do, and I think the SNP also want to do this, they might join forces on it, is to scrap, or to signal that they want to scrap the 2-child benefit limit, which is something that Labour hasn't committed to doing. So that will be an interesting one to see how many Labour MPs rebel on that.
Yeah.
And there's also, I think, another Labour MP is going to introduce an amendment on banning arms sales to Israel. So that'll be another one to see who rebels and how many. Ultimately, these things probably won't get enough votes to actually pass. And even if they did, it doesn't actually force the government to do anything, as far as I'm aware. It's more about signalling.
It's an interesting first sign of how difficult this horde of MPs is going to be to manage.
Yeah.
I think there's two things as well on that. I mean, the first thing is that there's apparently a meeting of the Parliamentary Labour Party the other day, and they were discussing the whipping operation going forward in the next Parliament. And apparently some of the backbench MPs are actually pushing for a more like regulated sort of whipping system. So, which is not what you'd expect from backbenchers, right? Like you'd want them to, usually backbenchers would want to be able to rebel. But there's a sign, this is at least a sign that this Labour this Labour Party going forward sort of wants to try and maintain this unity. Now, perhaps that's because of their experience in government previously, where the Labour have suffered historically. They're usually the party that fragment themselves and factionalise. Militant tendency in the 80s, things like that. That happens quite a lot. Or perhaps it's just the experience of the Conservative government for the last 14 years, where they've really, fragmented and it's come round to bite them. So I think, my expectation from that is that any rebellion will be small because of this meeting of the day, and I think that they're aware of what this will do. I think the other main thing about this debate is the impact of reform. So reform are now in the House of Commons, and apparently there's some reports that they got there very early this morning to secure seats in the Commons, because obviously the House of Commons can only seat 450 people. The number of MPs is 650, so not everybody will get in. So they were there quite early to secure seats.
I love that the excited new kids arriving early to get the seats.
Apparently they were there at 7 in the morning to try and get their seats. So I think that they're going to try and be very vocal. I think the other thing from reform is that they know that the Conservatives don't have their new leader. They know that they're not in the leadership election. So if they can sort of establish themselves as like a united voice on the right, a voice of opposition to the Labour government, if they can establish that early, I think they're hoping that they'll be able to use that going forwards, and they might be able to almost like usurp the Tories slightly before they've selected their new leader.
It's funny because Rishi Sunak will have to stand there and will have to do this until they have a new leader opposing the Labour government, and
least maybe only until Ian Duncan Smith becomes interim leader.
But you get maybe I'm projecting on him, but if you're on your way out, are you going to put that much effort into opposing this King's speech? Probably not, I guess, if you're Rishi Sunak. Yeah. Because you've just been, you have to sort of acknowledge that Labour's been handed this massive mandate, and you got sort of
nothing,
quite badly slapped about.
Also, And if in the campaign you sort of went, they've got no plan, they've got no plan.
Now
if you're a temporary leader with no plan, opposing a government that's just outlined its plan, it's a bit awkward. It's a bit awkward. Like, how do you say, this is what the Labour government wants to do, but this is what you can't even say this is what we're going to do.
Because you don't know what your party's going to do in 6 months.
Because and it's not even like, they're choosing between two leaders that are going to have relatively similar policy proposals. They're probably going to have very, very, depending on who they choose, you could have anyone from Tom Tugendhat to Suella Braverman or Priti Patel. And they're going to have very different ideas on things like immigration and asylum, things like that. So it makes this idea of opposition quite difficult, which is exactly what I'm saying about reform. Like reform can really try and then step in and capitalise on the fact that the Tories don't have their new leader yet, which is I think what they're going to try and do.
And I suppose, this won't be from the right, but the Lib Dems will do the same, presumably.
I wonder if they got their own time.
There's a lot more of them to fit in now.
There's loads of them to fit in. Yeah. That side of the Commons is busy, both sides, but busy with different parties. Like a lot of parties with more MPs, besides the Tories, but Well, interesting. We will see what ends up happening. We'll see what the policy platform ends up looking like longer term, because as you say, early days, indication as to what their key priorities are for the first year. And also, as we said, during the debate, it'll be interesting to see which elements there are rebellions on and how large those rebellions are. So it's an interesting start to Starmer's premiership, and we will see where he goes from here. This may well be the last episode of Bite the Ballot before we rebrand to something else. So, spoilers.
Sorry.
Bleep that. Yeah, this might be the last one because there's no more ballot to bite.
No.
We bit
no.
it.
Yeah.
We bit the ballot.
Yeah.
And I guess there's nothing else to say, but we'll see you soon. Right?
Yeah. Do we know when?
Probably next week.
Oh, fun.
Whoa.
Yeah. Why not next week? If enough people buy the magazine. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.